point to that look like there might not have been too much local benefit, but others generally will yield a lot of benefit. So you had your hand up.
What about the resource curse? Like, I think some people are very dependent on resource exports.
Yeah.
And also on foreign aid. So that could cast pressure on manufacturing exports.
Yeah, exactly. So the resource curse is maybe there. When resource prices are incredibly high, though, you don't really feel the pain of the resource curse. So the last decade or so in sub-Saharan Africa has been one where commodity prices have been so high that it could mask any sort of negative consequences. The implications for government revenue of being able to export at such high prices are really critical. I think we can't ignore those factors when we think about Africa's turn. Let me go on a little bit more, and then I'll take some more hands. I just want to show you some more figures. So this is foreign direct investment from China to the rest of the world. I just wanted to show you a picture here to get a sense of the implications of Chinese growth for the rest of the world. Remember, Chinese reform really starts in 1978. With the end of the Gang of Four and Deng Xiaoping coming to power, and there's a bunch of reforms in the late 70s and early 80s that really continue through the 80s and 90s. There were some major reforms in the mid-90s, I guess a Zhu Rongji period, and then so we're basically like 20-something years into Chinese growth before there's any substantial Chinese foreign investment going out. So for 20, 25 years, China was reforming; they were getting a lot of foreign investment in. Then starting in the early 2000s, you see this like massive increase in foreign direct investment per year. So this is the difference between short run and long run. Maybe in the short run, in these the 80s and 90s when Africa wasn't growing, Chinese growth and the attraction of investment to China hurt Africa. Now all of a sudden, there's a possibility that Chinese investment can enter Africa, which is in fact what has happened. We'll talk about that. So the medium run implications of Asia getting a lot richer may be different than the short run implications. Yeah. In terms of outward investment? Yeah. Explain your thinking about why that would be so consequential. So there's a lot of things entering the WTO does. What's your reasoning about why their investment would be better protected abroad after entering the WTO than before? Yeah. I'm not sure exactly why there'd be directly linked, but that was certainly a period where China's orientation changes. I mean, clearly at this point they're a lot richer. Trade goes up with many parts of the world, investment goes up, and whether joining the WTO was the cause of this or just a consequence of China saying, okay, now we need to really integrate with the global economy. I'm not sure. I guess that's the point I'm saying. I'm not sure if it's a proxy or a cause in some sense for change. Okay, huge change. So by 2010 or 2011, the last year they were talking about tens of billions of dollars a year in foreign direct investment. Okay. Now at the same time, FDI into Africa has increased. So let's talk about this question of the patterns of FDI over time that was raised. This is a good point. What ends up happening? You see very low levels of FDI really in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. There's no big drop off when Asia reforms. At the same time, levels were so low to start with that there wasn't too much FDI to begin with into Africa. And again, around 2000, we see this big upward spike. Now it kind of dips down with the global recession, but it goes back up again after that. We just don't have the most recent data. So you see at the same time this big increase in Chinese foreign direct investment and foreign direct investment into Africa. How are those related? Was the Chinese investment driving most of this? Kind of looks like it from those two figures. It turns out not to be the case. Despite all the media articles you've read, China is not the largest foreign direct investor in Africa. It's never been the largest foreign direct investor in Africa. The US invests more, Britain invests more, France invests more. China has gone from zero foreign investment in Africa up to something meaningful. I'll show you on the next plot. But of these tens of billions of dollars a year in foreign direct investment, China's going to account for maybe 10%. Okay? So I just want to disabuse people of the notion there's this whole media hysteria that basically China owns all of Africa. Like if you go somewhere, every single factory in Africa is owned by the Chinese. It's like completely false in the data. Okay, so here's some data. This is the breakdown of Chinese foreign direct investment in different regions. The vast majority of Chinese foreign direct investment is in other parts of Asia, not in Africa. The second largest region there by the end of the period in purple is in Latin America. The third largest region is in Europe. The fourth largest region is in North America, et cetera. So once we get to Africa, we're bouncing around here at a few billion a year, and a few billion a year is a lot. There's also been a lot of Chinese government aid and assistance to Africa that's been high profile. So there are capital flows beyond foreign direct investment. There's basically foreign aid flows and other subsidized investments, let's say. So China has now become a player in Africa. They're investing in Africa. Chinese firms are active, as they are all over the world. But I just want to kind of take this issue of the takeover of Africa by China kind of off the table, because it's not in the data. It's a big change, and I think part of the hysteria, flows from in North America and in Europe. I showed you those maps before about how big North America and Europe are in the global economy. They're just used to being the only game in town. They're used to being the only foreign investors. And now all of a sudden there's another meaningful sort of Asian foreign investor that's investing around the world, and it's kind of caused some disequilibrium. And so there's been a lot of hysteria around it. But US and European investors are still the largest investors in Africa. So anyway, that was the just point of a couple of these slides. Any comments or questions? Yeah. I didn't get the breakdown in terms of other Asian countries. Do some people know? Are some people familiar with sort of patterns of Chinese investment in Asia? I think there's been a lot of Chinese investment sort of throughout Asia, but yeah, go ahead. What's that? Oh, over here? I'm not sure if that $5 billion is just a few investments. I'm not sure exactly what's going on. I mean, one stylized fact that's come out over the last few years is African economies tended to be less affected by the global recession than many other parts of the world. Part of that is, they were less exposed in some sense to the global financial system. They were less integrated into the global financial system, so they were less affected by the crisis. But I'm not sure why that jumps around. It's an interesting observation. Okay, so we talked about foreign investment and how the rise of Asia opens up the possibility that now there will be some additional foreign investment in Africa because now there's rich Asian companies that want to invest. The other very important aspect of economic interaction between Asia and Africa has to do with trade. And here there's just an unambiguous change. Levels of trade between sub-Saharan Africa and Asia were minuscule in the 1990s and are now huge. So here are some, and the pattern is very clear. Manufactured goods are going from, I have the data from China to Africa, and basically raw materials are going from Africa to China. So that pattern that you read in the newspaper actually is true. And here's some of the data. This is total exports from Africa, sub-Saharan Africa to China. And you can see literally minuscule trade. I mean, like $1 billion a year in trade, which is like nothing for this population, around 2000, up to, I guess it's at 80 to $90 billion a year in exports by the end of the period. So just a huge increase in trade. So from maybe 2002 to 2012, almost an 8-fold increase or something like that. And what's so striking here, if you look at the blue line, is almost all of this is primary commodities. And a lot of it is just fuel, and maybe half of it is fuel or something like that. So there's just a lot of petroleum going from Africa to China. And there's a lot of primary commodities. There's a lot of copper, other minerals. That's what Africa's exporting to China. In terms of manufactured goods, it's just still minuscule. what's so striking about this, if you now go to imports into sub-Saharan Africa from China, it's at 60 or 70 billion, so tons of imports into Africa from China, and all of it is manufactured goods, machinery, consumer products, etc. So this is like as clear a pattern of trade as you can imagine. This is like petroleum and copper being sent to China, and shoes, utensils, and industrial machinery being sent from China to Africa, something like that. It's just amazing. Any other patterns that people see or anything noteworthy here? You can actually see the global recession here a little bit in trade, but that little dip down in 2008, 2009. Did you hear that? Yeah.
Maybe FDI deals will not make things more. Maybe the relation Asian China or Asian Africa become a big relationship. Maybe concession is more important than trade concession is more important than to the FDI flows.
Mhm.
I let you use this mineral line to and that's great.
Yeah.
Or I let you I sell this much gold to you, that's great.
Yeah, no, and I think people talk about this linkage. There is this kind of linkage between FDI and trade, where certain investments are made to sort of secure certain supplies. So we're going to make a certain investment, say a Chinese mineral company, precisely to facilitate this kind of trade, rather than say, oh, we're going to invest in Zambia and then sort of maybe export to the world from Zambia. It's like there's like this real need for copper in China. We're going to buy a mine in Zambia and then export to that precise good. Yeah. Yeah. So the trade from say Africa to Europe or Africa to the U.S. doesn't look that different than this. There are some differences. After about 2000, although these trade preferences have weakened, there was actually a period of preferential trade into the U.S. market for African textiles under something called the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, it's called. And during that period, there was actually a fair amount of export of textiles from Africa to the U.S. So there was, African trade with Europe and the U.S. is more diversified than this, but the broad patterns aren't that different. So for instance, Nigeria exports lots of petroleum to the U.S., et cetera. Well, I don't have the trade figures here. The FDI numbers are, there's more FDI from the U.S. and Europe. I'm not sure if in recent years if Chinese trade hasn't caught up to European and U.S. trade, but I don't have those figures here. This has been just like a startling increase in trade. That's a good question. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great point. Like you say, there's sort of private entrepreneurs selling consumer goods, selling other things, and that's quite a different story than big state-owned infrastructure companies building roads and railroads and telecommunications infrastructure, which is also going on sort of simultaneously. And this is sort of mixing those together in some sense. Yeah, I mean, basically there's this deal. We'll invest in something in return. I mean, this is this linkage that people often talk about. I mean, there's really flourishing relations. There's sort of Chinese entrepreneurial communities living in Africa. There's African entrepreneurs who have moved to China. I mean, it's a, it's a blossoming and new relationship. And I think part of the reason it gets so much media attention is it is new, and it sort of challenged prevailing notions about sort of north, there were sort of north-south economic relations, but these south-south relations are a new game, and I think that's part of why people are so excited about them. Okay, I want to do the clicker question again. We've actually talked through plus side, minus side. So very quickly, I want you to answer the same question again. If you've changed your answer, I want you to think about why you've changed your answer. I may ask you to say a word or two. So again, over the last 3 decades, has the, the rise of India, China, other Asian economies overall promoted development in Africa, hindered development in Africa, or the other answers we have up there? There's more people than last time. Maybe people came late. Okay, let's just do another few seconds here. Okay, so what does this look like? In the first round, it was 58% said promoted development, and 13% said hindered development. So it's 58 to 13. And now it's 60% promoted, and 18 said hindered. So it didn't change too much. Who changed their vote? And do you want to explain why? Just over the course of the lecture. Did anybody change what they put down? Somebody changed. Who is it? Who looks very guilty? Or are all these changes just the people that came in late? Wow, nobody changed. You guys are you have well-established views. I like that. I can respect that. Okay. Great. So we have about 5-6 minutes left. I want to wrap up this growth section, and now we're going to get into some of the specifics. We're going to talk about geography and this Blumen Sachs article. The goal of these first 2 weeks was to give you kind of the big picture, where Africa is in the global economy, how it's evolved, and now we're going to start talking about specific factors, interventions to promote growth. Okay. Any questions or comments before we make this transition? Okay. So I put this quote up last time by Blumen Sachs about geography, and their claim that at the root of African underdevelopment is geography. That if we understand African geography, we're going to go a long way towards understanding why it's poor. What evidence do they bring to bear on this problem? Well, they're very much focused on tropical geography in this article. And that point about the importance of being in the tropics extends beyond Africa. So where do they start? They say, well, if we look at tropical regions of the world and non-tropical regions of the world, and this is the data they use. This is a bit of a dated article, although the patterns aren't that different today. Non-tropical regions are much richer than tropical regions, like 3 times richer. Not like 10% richer, not 50% richer, like multiples of difference in living standards in the tropics versus the non-tropics. There's some big difference there. Sub-Saharan Africa may be particularly, this may be a particularly important fact for Sub-Saharan Africa because almost all of Sub-Saharan Africa is in the tropics. There's a little bit of Sub-Saharan Africa in the southern part of Africa, like South Africa, that's not in the tropics. That's more temperate. But what you see within Africa during this period is, again, this like 3-fold difference in living standards in the tropics versus the non-tropics. Now, it turns out in many parts of the world, you see similar patterns between more or less tropical regions. If you look at Brazil, huge developing or middle-income country, which we saw on the map the other day, the non-tropical parts in southern Brazil, it's in the southern hemisphere, the non-tropical parts are much richer than the tropical parts. Again, multiples of income. Historically, in the United States, the temperate and cold north was much richer than the subtropical south. That held there. Can people think of any other examples that are like this of countries that have tropical and non-tropical regions where this sort of pattern holds or doesn't hold, where this fails to hold? Yeah. Northern Europe and Southern Europe. Northern Europe has for 250, 300 years, maybe a little more, been substantially richer than Southern Europe. Even during the latest crisis, Northern Europe has done okay, and Southern Europe has basically done really poorly. What other cases? Yeah. Well, is there a north-south difference there, or just east-west? Yeah, so that may not be as relevant in the north-south sense. Yeah. Okay, so Singapore is tropical and really rich. Hong Kong is tropical and really rich. So it's clearly not the case that you can't be rich if you're tropical. There are cases of very wealthy countries that are tropical. But it's sort of a statistical relationship, say, that on average they tend to be poor. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think people would say being urban and being a knowledge hub and all that stuff is sort of an outcome of development, meaning it's a proxy for how developed they are. So they have their own history. There's some economic history work on precisely why Hong Kong and Singapore have done so well. Hong Kong did very well as a trading center for a long time, especially when China was closed. Communist China was closed. It still plays a very important role in the Chinese economy as separate, but also part of China. So Hong Kong has its own unusual history. But that's right. You can be tropical and rich. There's no contradiction. Yeah. Yeah, so people make that kind of argument that maybe just food is easier to get a handle on, or people often say that in Cold War, northern climates, if you're in Scandinavia, like you'd really better plan ahead and invest and whatnot, because it's going to be like you're not going to see the sun for 3 months at some point. So you better store all your food, and maybe it just requires a different form of economic organization or something like that. Okay, so this is the map of the world. The red lines are where the tropics fall. So you can see almost all of sub-Saharan Africa is in the tropics, and the bulk, even though there is a lot of Asia in the tropics, Southeast Asia, parts of South India, the bulk of China and the Middle East, et cetera, are non-tropical, right? They're above the tropics. Within South America as a whole, I talked about Brazil. These southern regions of Brazil are very wealthy. The wealthiest countries overall in South America are also the non-tropical countries in South America. Chile, Argentina, and Uruguay are much wealthier than Suriname, Bolivia, and Peru. Yeah. Yeah, so India is a really interesting case because on a lot of human development measures, education, health, et cetera, South India does very well. North India is more variable. There's North Indian states that are among the richest states in India, so we can think of Punjab. There are North Indian states that are among the poorest, so UP, Bihar, et cetera. So in India, the picture kind of breaks down. It isn't as clear as Brazil or some other countries. You have more or less developed states in both the north and the south, and it's harder to characterize in India. But you're right that some of the most developed states in terms of human development, of course, where Bangalore is and stuff, are in the south. So the picture in India is more complicated. Okay, so these are the channels they propose. The claim is agricultural productivity is lower in the tropics inherently. There's more disease in the tropics, and transport costs are different in the tropics. So please read the article, and on Tuesday, we're going to go through all these and decide if we think this makes sense or not. Okay. I think we're done. For like 5 minutes in the lecture. Okay. I've got it under control now. What's that? Oh, yeah. Way too human, believe me. Okay, you guys figure it out. You tell me, because I have no idea. Okay, 10 more seconds. All right, so let's take a look at your guys' responses. So this is pretty interesting. It's pretty spread out. So we have 19% saying historical accident, 18% distance to markets, almost half of you guys due to low agricultural productivity, 16% due to low labor productivity, and then that one honest person. And again, I know I'll find out who you are, and I'll send you a congratulatory email. So what's going